Ask clerk, please call roll.
Mr. Roach?
Here.
Mr. Haynes?
Here.
Mr. Bowers? Commissioner Hedden? Here. Mayor May?
Here. This meeting we called at the suggestion of our city solicitor, just to be sure that we were in compliance with Kentucky laws on the first reading. We feel like we are, but just to avoid any confusion, we wanted to have a first reading of the ordinance as it had been amended at the last commission meeting, and to incorporate all those amendments into one document. And for your all's consideration, Commissioner Roach informed he wanted to make a motion before.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
Oh, that's fine.
I didn't want to just do the reading without giving you that chance.
That's all right. Thank you, Mayor. I make a motion that we adjourn. The rationale for that is we didn't get the ordinance till this morning, and the update that was on the website, I guess until probably today, was the early July one. So just speaking for myself, I've not had a chance to read it. I don't see how hardly anybody in the community could have had the chance to read it and to find out to look over the things that we incorporated at the first reading. So I think we should adjourn and have a new meeting time.
There is a motion. Okay, I'll say that motion does not get a second, so it will die. And if there's no discussion, I'll ask, is there discussion?
I would like to say something.
Go ahead.
I do understand where you're coming from, Commissioner Roach, but I can't support the motion at this time, but we did just get this at 8:05 this morning. There was a hard copy in our mailboxes over the weekend. I picked mine up yesterday, and we just got this email to us this morning. So there really has been very limited time for us to read over it and make sure that everything is just as we would see fit.
And I would say I would have come and got my hard copy. I didn't know it was there. I talked to the city manager on Saturday, so I had no idea it was in the box. So, the honest answer is I've not reviewed it. I'm not prepared. I don't see how it would have been possible if you had to work today to be prepared, unless you'd come by this weekend. And based on my best information, I didn't know it was there.
When I had picked mine up on Sunday, I knew that my time was going to be limited as I fly out tomorrow, and I knew that any other meeting time was going to be difficult for me, so I was hoping it was in the box, and it was. And I did review it. I do have it has some minor corrections that need to be made, but I was prepared to bring that up today.
And just to say, too, that the solicitors does feel that we've already given a first reading to it, but just to be safe, he wanted to take those incorporated changes and put those in this document and just make this would be more of a technical correction, if you want to call it that. Really not even a technical correction, but just a technical procedure, just to alleviate any concerns that would allow someone to challenge the ordinance if it did pass later, and that this way it goes back and incorporates all of the amendments that were voted on and adopted into the ordinance at our last meeting. Does that sum it up, Solicitor? You want to say
I think
anything?
that accurately states it. My concern was, Mayor and Commissioner, was that when we held the first reading, if you'll recall, there were a number of amendments to the ordinance that were made during that meeting. And there were a lot of motions, a lot of seconds, a lot of amended motions, and because of that, I just wanted to make sure that everything was done exactly according to the statutes, because I know this has been somewhat of a controversial ordinance that a number of people are interested in. So I believe you summed it up accurately.
Okay, Commissioner.
Could I ask
what do you think, Commissioner? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's finished.
Okay, Commissioner Brewer.
Guys, so how would a member of the community know whether the changes were made or whether to look at things when, unless it was today, the updated ordinance wasn't on the website? I believe the one that was on there until yesterday was July the 5th. So how would anybody in the community be able to know what was going on?
What they would have had to do would to have kept track of the motions that were passed at the last meeting, and then take the copy of the ordinance that had been handed at it or was available at that time, and then make their own revisions.
Right. Well, and I think we all know that nobody's going to do that. So therefore, they really didn't have, not to put you on the spot, therefore they really didn't have an opportunity, is what we're saying. Because nobody could have followed that unless they had a tape recorder. And maybe you could have, but most people couldn't have followed that.
You would have had to pay very close attention at that meeting to have known all of the revisions that were exactly made, so you're right.
Right, the motion failed for a second, but I say there's no way that the community could know what we're looking at today.
This is a reminder, it's just to go back and make a technical move to make sure that the first reading did get its first reading, and this will ensure that there will be no problems. And then if there's issues, of course, we still have to vote on it. So people can still make comments on the ordinance today, which I know we have copies, and it's on the website. My understanding right now is that right? Okay. And so, since this is not a voting meeting anyway, it's just a first reading. If there's no objections, I'll ask for the first reading, and then folks can make comments between now and our next meeting. And I'll let the city clerk just, would you announce when the next meeting is, so people will know?
The next meeting is August the 12th, that's a work session.
And then the voting meeting is the 26th.
26th.
Okay. So August 26th will be the next opportunity to meet. This ordinance would receive action. Of course, any comments in between, people can continue to make those, either through email or contacting us by telephone, or if you see us on the street, as some people do, talk about it. All right, well, I will ask the solicitor to read it, the ordinance by title and summary only, and this is the amended version from the...
Could you speak into the mic, because we can't hear you?
I'm just doing a procedural thing. I'm just asking the solicitor to give a first reading based on the changes from the previous meeting that was already read once. We're just reading it again. So there's no change. There's no changes here from what was discussed at the last meeting.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Mayor, this contains, this ordinance that is being read today contains the amendments that were included in the first reading that was held on July the 22nd of this year. That was our last meeting, last voting meeting. By title, an ordinance amending Chapter 96, Fair Housing, Sections 96.01, 96.02, 96.03, 96.04, 96.05, 96.06, 96.07, 96.08, 96.09, 96.10, 96.11, 96.12, 96.13, 96.14, 96.15, 96.16, 96.17, 96.18, 96.19, and 96.99 of the City of Frankfort Code of Ordinances. And then by summary, this ordinance amends Chapter 96 of the City of Frankfort Code of Ordinances. The Fair Housing Ordinance was amended to prohibit discrimination against individuals on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation, to prohibit discrimination in employment and public accommodation, to exempt religious institutions from the provisions of the ordinance regarding gender identity and sexual orientation. Section 96.11 contains the reference to KRS 446.350, protecting a person's exercise of his or her religious rights. The mayor or fairness officer may resolve statements filed alleging discriminatory treatment under this chapter. Formal complaints alleging discrimination on the basis of other than gender identity or sexual orientation may be filed with the State Human Rights Commission for enforcement. formal complaints alleging discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation, which include additional allegations of discrimination, may be filed with the local Human Rights Commission for enforcement. A 7-member City of Frankfort Human Rights Commission is created with the power to determine violations of the Fairness Ordinance. A hearing officer would conduct any formal hearings and issue findings of fact, conclusions of law, and a recommended order. The Human Rights Commission would then accept the recommended order or revise it as deemed necessary. There is no automatic right of appeal from the decision of the Human Rights Commission. Individuals that are the subject of illegal discrimination may file a complaint directly with the Franklin Circuit or District Court, and the penalty section is set forth in Section 96.99.
Okay, thank you. Just had a first reading. That was the only item on the agenda, so entertain a motion for adjournment, unless there's any comments about this ordinance.
Do you have a comment?
Okay, Commissioner Haynes.
Most of them are administrative. On page 7, 9609C, on the second sentence, I think after the word because, should be of, not or.
Mr. Haynes, can I ask you to say that again so I can mark it?
96.09, under unlawful practice in connection with employment.
C.
See?
C.
Yes, sir, I see that.
And on page 10, under enforcement, at the last paragraph of number A, right after not more, should be than $500. Just needs a than put in there.
Right.
And if you look at 96.07 exemptions, and I'm not sure on this particular one. It looks like a duplicate, just in wording, but if you look after the word for other than commercial purposes, then right below it, for other than commercial purposes, the only thing that changes, one says which it owns or operates, the other one says to its members or given. I don't know if that was just written that way, but it looked like, I kept reading it over and over again, and it's just like a duplicate of wording. But I could be wrong on that one.
Yeah, so I'm not sure.
Commissioner Haynes, that language is actually correct. That's from the original Fair Housing Ordinance, and I thought it was a little bit, it could have been written better, but since it was from the original ordinance, I left it as is.
Okay.
Anything else?
Go ahead.
Well, but I think the same answer is going to apply to right above 96.06. It says, or any person associated with him or her. I just didn't understand that part, but that probably came from the exact wording from something else. So
It's the current.
the current. I have no further questions.
Okay. Commissioner Roach.
Mr. Moore, could you, for my, perhaps everybody else already knows it, but for perhaps my benefit, could you go over the areas that we amended from the prior meeting? I'm sorry, but that way we can see have an idea of what we said and whether it fits.
Right. If you'll look at the first whereas clause,
Yes, sir.
if you'll see in the second line, we added the phrase "welcome diversity." The definition of employer on page 2, it's the law, but just to make sure that no one has any questions, at the end of the definition of employer, I included the phrase excluding the United States and the Commonwealth of Kentucky or one of its agency or corporations or an Indian tribe. And that's actually from the statute. I just felt like that was consistent with what you all wanted me to do, and it was in the statute. At page 9, I believe this was already in there, but out of an abundance of caution, I would refer you to section 96.11B, which specifically exempts religious institutions, associations, societies, or entities, or organizations operated for charitable or educational purposes owned or operated by religious institutions from the provisions dealing with sexual orientation or gender identity. In section 96.14A, the very last line, consistent with your direction, the employee of a city who makes information available concerning an alleged violation improperly would not be fined more than $500. Page 11, section 96.14C. Again, that deals with employees, and we took out language concerning fining of more than $1,000 or in prison for 1 year for improperly releasing information, and that, of course, is taken care of in the section that I just previously read. In section 96.16, you'll see where the Frankfort Commission on Human Rights is authorized to issue remedial orders requiring cessation of violations and orders imposing the penalty set forth in section 96.99, and of course that penalty is a $500 fine. And then in paragraph 5, you'll see that the local Human Rights Commission only has the authority to employ hearing officers, clerks, and other employees and agents. In paragraph 96.17, the fourth line down, it of course authorizes the court to take certain action, and I'm sorry, if you look at the fourth line from the bottom, the court has the power to grant temporary relief or restraining orders, setting aside orders of the commission, etc. Before that had included the term Human Rights Commission, and again, since you all wanted this Human Rights Commission punishment to only be $500, any authority in excess of imposing a $500 penalty was removed there. And then, if you look at 96.19, prevention of intimidation C, if you look at the last 4 lines there, you'll see that the fine that would be available for the violation of this ordinance would be a $500 fine. And of course, if any of the other conduct occurs, that would be dealt with in the normal criminal process. If someone assaults someone or takes more serious action than that. And those were the changes that were made.
Thanks.
One quick question. We keep saying a $500 fine. What we really talking about is up to $500. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could
Go ahead.
ask a couple of more, and I think they're pretty quick. Like for example, if it's a Boy Scouts and they're meeting at Second Street Christian Church. I don't think there is one, so I'll just make that up. The Boy Scouts of America has recently allowed homosexual troop members to be a member and wouldn't be discharged, but the Scoutmasters and that type of thing, I think it's still not possible. So would they be in violation of the ordinance? So the Boy Scouts be in violation of the ordinance?
Well, first of all, you have a couple, let me ask you to clarify your question.
All right.
This is the oldest lawyer's trick in the book.
Well, that's all right. My brother's a lawyer, I understand.
Okay. But you have, are you limiting your question solely to gender identity and sexual orientation, or are you also including the broad categories of race, age, sexual
Well, since I don't
discrimination?
know either one of them, how about both?
Both, okay. All right. I don't believe that the Boy Scouts of America would fit within the exemption that's provided for religious institutions, associations, societies, or entities, because they're not created by a church. And I don't think that just by the fact that they're operating in a church's basement would make that exemption apply. With respect to the general exception, which is, so that would be the exemption in 96.11B. With respect to the general exception in 96.11A, which is the statutory exception, if the Boy Scouts could show that that due to a sincerely held religious belief, they're taking certain action, and the city cannot produce clear and convincing evidence that there's a compelling government interest to take that action, then pursuant to that general exception, perhaps the Boy Scouts could take the action that they propose, whatever it may be.
So, Mr. Moore, then you're saying that on nonprofits that have either a loose or less than loose affiliation with a religion would, because they're not to the level of our language, would not in general be exempted except under 96.11A as a possibility?
That's correct, and maybe a better one would be, and I'm probably not giving the name right, but the Susan Komen Cure for Cancer charitable entity. I don't know that that's associated with a religious, has a religious association, so, or affiliation, so I think that they would be subject to the city's ordinance.
So the bottom line would be that they would be under the ordinance, and if we're challenged, they would have to try to use the exemption language to not be under it.
That's correct.
Do you know of any case where a city ordinance such as this has been, where this issue has come up?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Another quick question is, I assume on public schools, how does that animal work? They're largely funded by the state, but they would still be under the ordinance or not? I know I tried to get them taken out when I tried to amend it earlier, but I also wondered about, given the control over the public schools, where would that fall?
And again, just for the audience, you're talking public schools.
Yes, sir.
Because if
Yes,
you're a private school association associated with a church, then you would be exempt. But with respect to public schools, I would have to look to see whether or not public schools are specifically designated as an agency of the Commonwealth or not. If they're not designated as an agency of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, then they would be subject to the ordinance.
And on the general exception on 96.11 on B, those last parts where you talk about majority of its annual funding, there wouldn't be since they wouldn't be a agency of the government, even if they received a large percentage of their monies from the government, that from the state or the federal government, that would make them immune from the ordinance. So I guess I'm asking the opposite of what you have there.
So if they receive less than a majority?
No, I'm just saying that if they get 90% of their money from the federal government, that they would still have the ordinance applied to them.
And again, subject to doing research to see whether or not they'd be categorized as a state agency, they would be subject to the ordinance.
Thank you.
Any further? Ready to adjourn? Okay. Entertain a motion to
Move for adjournment?
move by Commissioner Haynes,
Second.
second by Commissioner Hedden. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call roll.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
Mr. Haynes?
Yes.
Mr. Hedden?
Yes.
Mayor May?
Yes, we are adjourned. Thank you all.